Episode 1. The First Bison in the Fire. More than 8,000 years ago, on the ancient land of China in the east, in the deep universe, nebulae surged like boiling blood, the vault of heaven cracked, and the abyss of black mud dripped. Amidst the despair of all things returning to zero, the ancient echo of goddess Nuwa radiated high-dimensional divine light, holding the five-colored stones that gathered the universe's primal emotions and soared upward. The five-colored stones represented pure love and pain, turning into a gorgeous stream of light the moment they touched the crack. Wherever the light reached, the abyss was perfectly mended. Nuwa scattered the sparks of creation to the mortal realm, and this sky was originally firmly protected, leaving behind warm traces. After long ages, time flowed into a highly automated future. The visual temperature dropped sharply, and humans were alienated into cold parts on a massive production line. Deprived of a connection with art for a long time, the numb collective subconscious of humanity gathered in the dark, eventually generating an absolute rational force called Zero Domain. Giant grayish-white geometric cracks spread like lightning, ruthlessly destroying the cosmic space-time of art. The sky that had once been mended collapsed again, and countless precious essences of art shattered, scattering to all corners of the river of time. In a cold and lifeless dark corner of the city, a high-dimensional light glowed, and Iona emerged with the compassionate echo of goddess Nuwa. Her silver hair fluttered gently, and her hands softly cradled a glowing, translucent tesseract, the space-time blocks designed to collect shattered space-time. Looking up at the ruined spiritual universe, her eyes empty and sorrowful, she lamented the destruction brought by oblivion. Only by retrieving the scattered fragments of art and life's touching moments can we piece together the lost truth, goodness, and beauty. Grayish-white data covered the future streets of Taipei, and Taipei 101 in the rain was lost in the cold neon light. As the most ordinary cog on the assembly line of the city, the youth Li Yu had empty eyes. Iona passed the space-time blocks into his hands. At the moment of touch, the warmth of ancient art flooded his heart, bringing back the long-lost sense of pain and the reality of life. This time, we must mend the sky ourselves. Liu gripped the blocks tightly, about to embark on a mending journey to collect the lost truth, goodness, and beauty. The dusk in Taipei in the future will be a symphony of neon lights. In this highly AI-automated city, light, shadow, temperature, and humidity are all precisely controlled by a central computing system to provide residents with the most comfortable physiological environment. Liu is sitting in his personal work cabin on the 60th floor of his apartment, with several translucent projection panels floating in front of him. As a systems analyst, he is used to using precise data to measure everything around him. He gave the order a little tiredly, picked up the cup, and took a sip of the dusk's special orange juice just prepared by the molecular synthesizer. It was a perfect sweet-sour ratio that would have brought him a moment of relaxation. However, the sweet and sour taste was still on the tip of the tongue, but the liquid in the cup changed strangely before his eyes. Voice Assistant detects indoor spectrum and system voltage. Lee scratched his hair a little irritably and clicked on the holographic screen. The corners of his eyes twitched slightly, showing an anime-like expression of confusion. Detection completed. The spectral distribution and voltage output are in line with the presets. A female AI voice sounded. The reduction in saturation is the result of system energy-saving optimization and does not affect spatial recognition and human body functions. Please rest assured. It has no impact on function. Is beauty just an accessory to function? Liu murmured to himself. His reason told him that the system was correct, but his intuition felt a little strange. He stood up and walked towards the French window. The world is losing color and human perception of beauty is disappearing. At this time, the space-time building block in the center of the workbench suddenly floated, and the light blue lines flickered violently, twisting into circles of ripples. The silver stardust scattered, and the guide Iona emerged from the light in the form of a primitive priest girl, which shocked Liu. Iona's voice resonated in her mind. The fire is extinguishing, Liu. The first traces of human beings recorded on the stone wall are being erased. Go look for the bison running in the fire. If it goes out, we will forever lose the ability to feel warmth. The space-time building blocks erupted with bright light and then condensed into a translucent cube with the coordinates of 17,000 BC, Lascaux Cave, flashing on the panel. Liu looked at his slightly gray fingertips, clenched the blocks, and walked into the bright light. Liu walks through the streets of future Taipei, looking for the source of color loss. This technological city now exhibits a shocking silence. The space-time building block in his hand vibrated violently, and the geometric lines pointed to an artificial forest in Central Park. It was covered with gray crystals. Warning, high-dimensional logic interference detected. Black cracks appeared on the surface of the space-time building block, and its operation was blocked. What stood in front of him was a geometric crystal wall, engraved with a primitive bison totem outlined by gray lines. The bison was lifeless like a cold skeleton. To open the channel, Liu must solve the puzzle and reconstruct the original red wavelength. Red has a wavelength of 620 to 750 nanometers. Liu entered the value, but the crystal wall did not respond. Instead, under the pressure of the zero domain, pixelated gray-white cracks began to spread to his fingertips. The building blocks deformed, projecting a stone mortar. Several types of gray particles appeared in front of Liu's eyes, and he had to mix the frequencies based on his knowledge of red. Red is not a number. Liu closed his eyes. He no longer relies on code, but feels the flow of blood in his body. He stretched out his trembling hands and combined the two wavelengths symbolizing heaviness of earth and heat of fire in the mortar. A low resonance sounded. A pure dark red light suddenly emerged from the surface of the space-time building blocks. Liu looked at this dark red entrance. This illogical and rough red color showed extremely real vitality at this time. He didn't hesitate and stepped into the void. Cold and darkness instantly surrounded Liu. He was standing in a deep natural cave. The air is heavy with the smell of damp earth, the acrid smoke of burning animal fat, and the rugged feel of pristine wilderness. He followed the sound towards the firelight and looked at a young priest wearing animal skins with black mud on his face, kneeling in front of the stone wall. He was holding a hollow bird bone tube, and the stone tray in his left hand contained black charcoal powder. However, the young priest's movements froze. The original ochre-red bison mural on the stone wall is being covered by gray crystals, and the red lines on the cow's belly are gradually turning into a dry gray skeleton. "Why draw?" the young priest said in a desperate voice. "The wind and snow don't stop, the children are dying, and the stones can't speak. What's the use of these?" Liu stepped forward and decided to answer with action. Liu knelt on the ground and picked up a heavy stone to grind the ochre-red hematite ore. The sound of the impact of the stone tools broke the dead silence of the cave. The young priest looked at him doubtfully. Liu poured the red powder into the tray, added animal fat, and mixed it evenly with his fingers. The ochre-red grease was thick and hot, melting on his fingertips. "Tomorrow we will all die," the young man whispered. "This makes no sense." Liu looked directly at him. "No, this makes sense. When humans drew the first bison, they were actually saying to death, 'We have lived before.'" Liu raised the torch to smoke the stone wall to dry the rock. The young priest was shocked, and a glimmer of light ignited in his empty eyes. Liu then picked up the bone tube and blew out fine ochre dust, leaving palm prints on the stone wall. At this time, there was only the last spark left in the torch. The cold gray light surged, and the last silhouette of the bison was about to disappear. The gray geometric cold light of Zero Realm spread crazily on the cave wall. The stone wall originally painted with red bison was wrapped in gray crystals, and the bison mural was turning into a lifeless gray-white skeleton. Liu didn't hesitate and pressed his hands covered with red ochre powder against the rock wall. The young priest also rushed over. His two pairs of hands stained with bright red paint overlapped and dragged hard on the cold stone wall, leaving an extremely rough red arc. Before the torch was completely extinguished, Liu's fingers used the last touch of vermilion paint to complete the last thick outline of the bison's thighs, chest, and abdomen. When humans drew the first bison, they were actually saying to death, "We have lived." In an instant, the bison and galloping horses on the rock wall suddenly came to life, turning into giant beasts burning with ochre and golden flames, galloping and roaring in the dark cave. The flame hoof smashed the gray geometric crystals of the zero domain into pieces. The space-time building blocks flew into the air, absorbing the red light strips transformed by the bison, and the stone walls were filled with red ochre and carbon black again. The building blocks accelerate and rotate in midair, and the mysterious lines on them perfectly fit into the bison pattern. When the strong light dissipated, Liu opened his eyes and found that he had returned to the work cabin in Taipei in the future. Molecular synthesizers hum, and data rolls steadily. The time and space fluctuations are over, and the system is running normally. The voice assistant spoke calmly. He raised his hands. There was no petroleum grease on his fingertips, but he could still clearly feel the roughness and heat of the stone wall. Liu turned to look out the window. The neon colors of future Taipei outside the window are once again lit up, but the corners of some buildings are still cold gray and white pixels. The city is back to life, but it's not perfect. Liu walked to the edge of the towering open-air balcony. An extremely magnificent and deep orange-red sunset was burning in the sky, dyeing the steel backbone of the entire city golden red. The afterglow of the setting sun reflected in his eyes, and the depths of his pupils were no longer scrolling data codes, but reflected the shape of a jumping flame. The space-time building block in Liu's arms suddenly shook violently, and a cracked lush clay tablet was projected in midair, with triangular cuneiform characters and double snake seals engraved on it. Iona's voice rang in her ears. "We lit the torch, Liu, but the shadow has spread to the starting point of the text." The space-time block on Liu's chest suddenly made an extremely unstable click sound, as if the internal gears were stuck, and the core block began to flash violently. In the surrounding air, there is a faint noise of the collapse of the real world. It is a heavy breathing sound that is extremely tired but unable to sleep, implying that the real world is losing its dream. Human beings can no longer dream while sleeping. Amid the chaos and surge of energy, the light of the building blocks barely cast an afterimage in midair. It is a touch of azurite and stone green with a sandy texture, which belongs to the special colors of Dunhuang murals and Buddhist art. The incomplete writing flashed in the light and shadow. Fragments of time and space. 1,000-year-old Buddhas light in the yellow sand. Then, with a pop sound, the block cut off the projection due to extremely unstable energy, leaving only a faint wisp of white smoke. Liu clenched the slightly hot bricks and frowned. He knew that the Zero Realm was eroding faster than imagined, and the next battle to save his soul was already waiting for him deep in the yellow sand.